Alright, today we're going to talk about how to make a dump sheet on our EOC reference sheet. So this is something that if you practice, you can recreate it as soon as the test proctor says time has started. You can start your test. You cannot write on your reference sheet prior to the test starting. Okay, so in your directions, whenever they say you can begin, that's when you can start writing on your reference sheet. In geometry, we have a ton of formulas and stuff that are not given to us. So if you keep practicing these things over and over again, it'll help you to memorize some important facts. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some information about some important vocabulary on here. So we're going to add a picture here, and we're going to write VA and VA. VA stands for vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. Vertical angles are the angles that are on opposite sides of the X. Okay. We're going to draw a picture down here like this with a line, and we're going to put A and B here. We're going to write LP. LP is for linear pair, and we're going to write A plus B equals 180. Linear pairs are supplementary. Okay, they add up to 180. They make a line. Right over here, we are going to draw two parallel lines and a transversal. And we're going to fill in some important vocabulary. We're going to use some abbreviations. The first thing we're going to fill in is AEA. AEA stands for alternate exterior angles. We're going to put that AEA out here because this is the alternate exterior angle that matches with that one. They're both on the outside and on opposite sides of the transversal. The next one we're going to fill in is AIA. AIA stands for alternate interior angles. Okay, opposite sides of the transversal and on the inside. Okay. We're going to fill in corresponding angles. We're going to put one here and one here. CA stands for corresponding. Corresponding means same position. So these angles are both under the parallel line and to the left of the transversal. Corresponding are in the same position. Okay. And then we're going to do consecutive interior. Consecutive interior is going to be CI, and we're going to put those here. These are consecutive interiors because they're on the inside and they're on the same side of the transversal. Now another one we don't really talk about very often is consecutive exteriors, but we can go ahead and name those too. Consecutive exteriors would be on the outside, right, because the exterior and on the same side of the transversal. Now, out of all these angles here, some of these angles are congruent to each other. Our vertical angles are going to be congruent. Our alternate interiors, our alternate exteriors, and our correspondings are going to be congruent. The ones that are going to be supplementary to each other are going to be our linear pairs, these, our consecutive interiors, and our consecutive exteriors. So when we see problems involving supplementary angles, we're going to set them up like they equal 180. When we see congruent angles, we're going to equal those to each other. Okay, so this is one section of our reference sheet that we would fill in that has to deal with angles. Okay, another thing we can fill in up here at the top is we're going to write conditional and we're going to write converse. Okay. For a conditional, we do if then. The if part's the hypothesis, the then part is the conclusion. Okay, so if you want to write out hypothesis, conclusion, you can, H and C, however you want to do that. If I have a converse, it means I switch them around and I start with the conclusion and end with the hypothesis. Okay, so that's just some vocabulary. All right, we're going to move down here and we're going to look at slope. So when we deal with slope, we're checking for parallel lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. We might also be checking for perpendicular lines. For perpendicular lines, we flip the fraction over and we change the sign. So for example, if we had 2/3, we would change it to -3/2. We flipped it and we changed the sign. So I like to write that example down. Okay. Then we're going to look at some formulas that they give us. They give us the midpoint formula. That's when you have 2 coordinates. We also had to use something similar to find the centroid, and the centroid's when they're going to give you 3 coordinates. So instead of dividing by 2, you divide by 3. So that's something that's easy to remember because you're just, divide by 3. You're just changing this formula by adding a third and then dividing by 3. But you got to remember that word centroid. Okay, the circle formula is kind of similar to the distance formula, so I write it underneath the distance formula. So our circle formula is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And then I'm going to write an example underneath that. I'm writing the example with it to help me remember that we have to change these signs because my center is going to be at 1, -2. That helps me remember I have to change my signs. And then this part, I have to remember to take the square root of r squared to get r. Okay, on the rest of the front, we're going to write some important information. We're going to write congruent triangles, and we're going to write all our methods, SSS, SAS, ASA, AAS, and HL. And then we're going to write similar triangles, SSS, SAS, and AA. There's 5 ways for congruent triangles and 3 ways for similar triangles. Okay, we're going to write down some stuff about proofs next. Okay, so for proofs, there's 2 properties that we use a lot. Transitive property says if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That comes up a lot in proofs. The other one that comes up a lot is reflexive. Reflexive says that we have the same exact thing on both sides, so it looks identical. It might have to do with angles. It might have to do with segments. Okay. All right, we got a little bit more we're going to put on this side. We're going to put triangle, and we're going to have A, B, C, and E. When we have a triangle, we know all of the angles on the inside always add up to 180. And then the other rule is that this angle on the outside is equal to the 2 angles on the inside that aren't next to it. Okay, so those are 2 rules with triangles we need to know. All right, then we've got a little bit more vocabulary that we're going to write down. This symbol means perpendicular. When we have a perpendicular bisector in a triangle, we can make a circumcenter. And I like to draw a picture by that and put a triangle inside a circle to remind us what that looks like. We have an angle bisector, and if we make those in a triangle, we get an incenter, and that is when you have a triangle with a circle on the inside. And then when you have medians, you're going to deal with the centroid, which we wrote that formula up here, but then we also want to remember that 1/3 is super important when we're dealing with a centroid. All right, last thing we're going to put on the front of this is our parallelogram stuff. Okay, so we're going to draw a picture of a parallelogram, and we're going to mark our diagram. These sides are the same, they're parallel, and they're congruent. So we mark these congruent. And then it's important to know about the angles. If we label these angles A, B, C, D, in this picture, A is equal to C, B is equal to D. And then also the ones that are next to each other add up to 180. So we could say A plus B equals 180, or A plus D equals 180. We could go all the way around and say D plus C, B plus C, but that's writing a lot of stuff. I think this is enough to get you to remember that. All right, so that's the front of our sheet.